it comes to DIY and resin, you have a world of opportunities when you bring in the wonderful world of buttons from Dress It Up Buttons. Hello friends, my name is Mayflom, and here we have some different silicone molds that are great for resin crafting. Now, you can use a lot of different types of resins. There's a lot on the market, and I recommend that you look into those as far as how to use them, best practices, and all of that. What you see me doing here is sprinkling some powder. It's kind of somewhere between like mica flakes and gold leafing and glitter. It's really fun stuff, but I'm just putting some of this inside some of my molds. And the reason I am doing that is that I want some of these to have a backing. In other words, on the back side of these, I want there to be kind of more solid color to disguise, as you'll see when we're done, disguise some things. Now, some of them I'm doing, some of them I'm not. I'm really having fun and playing here. And if you're wondering why in this video am I making so many different resin things, well, you do have to mix up a minimum batch. But before we get to our resin, what you'll notice here, I've prepped the molds. If there were any any additions to put in the bottoms, they're in there. Now what I'm doing is cutting the shanks off of buttons that I intend to use. These are all different buttons available at Dress It Up Button Shop, from Disney to Christmas. And what I am doing here with this is making sure that I can fit the buttons I want to fit in the molds. I want them, kind of designing them, getting an idea, because once I have the resin, if I commit to buttons, well, I can remove them, but they will not be reusable. So I want to be very sure what I think I want to use, how I want to use it. And this gives me unlimited time as well. I can take as much time as I need on this step, on this part of our little journey here. All right, so once I've started to figure out, well, it's addictive. And once I've committed, I am trimming the backs off, and I am making sure if I trim a shank off to really do a nice job of getting it nice and flat. What we're going to be making today, there are some keychains, which there will be a separate video on as far as DIY of the keychain. There is also a couple of coasters. You see those at the top. And I also have a light fixture, a light cover, light switch cover. So I'm using ice resin. Again, any kind of resin will work for this project. You'll notice I have gloves on now. That's the other thing. I have gloves on now because that is very important. You don't want this stuff on your hands. Well-ventilated room. Again, do your research. Make sure that you're using all the proper safety precautions, as well as the instructions as far as temperature and all those different things with resin. I'm just giving this a very gentle stir as indicated for at least 2 minutes. Again, each resin is a little bit different. Once I have this all mixed up, we are ready to party. And if you're wondering again, why so many projects, May? Because I have to make a minimum amount of resin for this type of resin that I'm using, which means I might as well pull a couple molds out and make a couple projects at once. Batch creating is always fun, but this is even more fun because it means I get to make a whole bunch of things for you today. Now what you see me doing is pouring a thin layer over the glittery powder stuff, and what I'm doing that for is so that it kind of traps that in. So that layer is going to kind of hold that down. Since resin is pretty thick stuff, that's going to hold that down just so it doesn't really interfere with my creating and my button stuff. And I'm just going to go through and every single little mold here, as you're seeing, go ahead and pour some in there. Now I am working on a mat, a very old mat actually. So I don't care if a little resin gets on here and then has to get scraped off tomorrow. I'm not really concerned about that. You would definitely want to be sure to work in a place where it's okay if the resin gets on your table or cover your table. And now I've got some loose glitter here. This is my light switch plate that I talked about, and I'm just getting my little stir stick here. And by the way, both my stir stick and the container I mix the resin in, I use reusable ones so that when you just have to let the resin totally dry and then it will peel right off of those. It will not stick to those, same as the molds. So now what we're doing is we're getting the light switch cover all glittered and getting all those edges filled in. And the reason I am doing that is two things. Number one, I just kind of want those molds that have the material already in them, I want those to dry for a minute or two. And number two, this is the project I'm most excited about because I am going to make a Christmas cookie for the kitchen. Make it with Christmas cookies. And this button set from Dress It Up Buttons is the absolute cutest. There's so many uses for it. You could, as you see here, we're making a light switch cover. You could also make a recipe box. You can create with it in your scrapbooks. You can make a recipe book, not just a box. You could put an album cover for family recipes. I mean, there's so many different uses and there's so many cute designs in here. Cookie cutters and gingerbread men and the little sugar container and the little mixing bowl. I just love them all. And I'm adding in some tiny hearts here just for color and contrast. And then I'm adding a little more resin. So the buttons will be adhered to the resin. We do not have to cover them. They do not have to be sealed. And a project like this is a pretty thin mold. So we're really not going to be able to cover all of those buttons. And again, that's totally fine. That's not a problem. But some of them, if I do want them covered or I want to make sure they're in a certain position, I can just tap, tap, tap them there. And that's gonna be that. Once you're set with it, once it's full and you're happy, you want to set it aside and let it cure, usually for a day. Now, since I have that glitter out, I'm just going to tap some glitter over here into our friend Mickey, and we're going to add a little again with my stir stick, and I'm just going to add a little resin here in the bottom. A lot of times when I'm doing glitter and buttons or anything like that, I like to kind of try to separate the two just so that the button doesn't get covered up by the glitter or whatever else that I am utilizing. And there we go with the other one with the little joy button. So cute. By the way, you can see these guys get made in a separate video that is available here or will be available soon, depending on when you're viewing this, on our YouTube channel. And there is a link or will be a link in the description once it's posted. Back now, we've got our coasters, and I'm just going to set this one. I just wanted little snowflakes in here. I don't know, kind of a funky Christmas or wintry, non-committal. I don't know. I like this color, and then I liked the white snowflakes with that color of glittery stuff. And I thought, let's just put some snowflakes in here and have fun. And then my round coaster. I've got some trees. And again, these are all buttons available now in the Dress It Up button shop. And essentially, I took my collection and I thought, okay, well, what buttons do I like and for what products? And you can find in the description, we are linking to the specific buttons used, so you can find them as well. And I think that a mixture of shapes and sizes, if you're trying to make like a little scene, is a lot of fun. But I also think really, honestly, it's a resin craft. Just have some fun with it. And 100% yes, these are all giftable. Now, what you see me doing here is that one I'm happy with. So I pour resin over the top, and I want to pour it all the way to the top because that one, as well as my other coaster, we want our coasters nice and flat. So that is something to remember before you start doing your resin. Pause for a second, check and make sure, are my buttons going to be, are they going to be able to be covered if it matters? If it doesn't matter, well, there you go. Now what you see here, this is a jewelry mold. I had just a tiny bit of resin left over, wasn't sure what to do with it. So I pulled out my jewelry mold. It's always good to have a couple ready if you're doing a batch and you're not sure how much you're going to use. Then the hard part, the waiting overnight. You don't have to wait though. You get to see it right away. And I always pull it out and kind of take a look. And if there's imperfections, it depends on what the imperfection is. We can always pour a thin layer of resin over an area if it needs to, like if there's a hole in it or an air bubble that popped up and left a hole, or I don't know, whatever there might be. These, honestly, I just love how they turned out. And because I use this solid kind of color on the backing, you don't notice the back of the buttons when it's flipped over. Versus, here we go, all ready for the kitchen. You really can tell on this, on the light switch plate, you can tell because it's clear on the back. Now, for me, this is not a problem. If this is a problem for you, you would just cover it with paper. You could cover it interior with like a paint or alcohol ink. There's lots of things you could, after the fact, cover it with. And this guy, I'm just showing you an example of, there's an air bubble that you could take a little resin, dip it in there just the next time you ran a batch. But look, you can see the textures, you can see all the colors. And isn't this a fun way to utilize our buttons, get our buttons in there and done. Now, notice that with the exception of my little keychains and my jewelry, of course, all of these are giftable and ready to go. You don't have to do anything else. You had all the fun playing, then the resin cured and you're good to go. Or again, you can do something like jewelry or keychains or purse charms or whatever else and do additional crafting. I hope I have inspired you and welcomed you here to the world of DIY resin crafting. And I hope you will tune back in because we have a lot more videos and a lot more fun coming your way and you won't want to miss out. Thank you so much for watching my tutorial. I will see you next time.